everyone, and welcome to Season 7, Episode 5 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host, Travis McNeil, and today we continue our countdown of the top 50 matches in CHIKARA history with match number 46 on our list, which is the match between Mike Quackenbush and Chris Hero from the CHIKARA Aniversario event held on May the 26th of 2007. This is a match that, although time hasn't been kind to one of the performers in it, being Mike Quackenbush, speaking out all, allegations, all of that stuff, surrounds that man. But this is a match that time has been kind to as far as it being a match is concerned. It was, in 2007, the biggest possible match that CHIKARA could run, one of the biggest matches in, the company's entire history at that point, a lot of hype going into it. And it almost felt like, even if this match was an outstanding all-timer, it still might not have met the hype for it. And, at the time in 2007, it really did feel like a little bit of a disappointment. But watching it back now, 15 years later, which seems crazy to me that amount of time has passed, it's a really excellent contest, and it works a lot better, watching it now and not having those expectations on it. We could spend all day talking about the story and the build up to this match. Basically, Chris Hero was, wrestled on the first CHIKARA show opposite Mike Quackenbush in a trios match. Both of these men, were kind of those indie mainstays, very similar. Chris Hero is one of those wrestlers where I truly feel that he is one of the best professional wrestlers easily of his generation, but if not of all time. He was one of those OG, real student of the game wrestlers, much like a lot of wrestling fans like myself, where the man was just obsessed with wrestling and would watch every style, and it's made him one of the most versatile pro wrestlers ever. He can do crazy brawls, he can do, Japanese strong style type wrestling, he can wrestle, technical wrestling with the best of them, be it UWF style or, the British, World of Sport style. He can do lucha libre, he can be silly and, do comedy. He can show ass, but he could be, menacing. He is just so multifaceted. And, Mike Quackenbush, maybe not to that level, but again, just an incredibly fluid pro wrestler. So it would make sense that these guys, would naturally be drawn to each other. Mike Quackenbush brought Chris Hero in to become co-trainer at the CHIKARA Wrestle Factory. This would lead to them becoming a tag team known as the Super Friends, and it would lead to this monumental match at the 2004 IWA Mid-South Ted Petty Invitational, one of the best tournaments in professional wrestling history. If you have never seen it, Smart Mark Video just re-released it on Blu-ray, and it is something that you owe yourself to watch. And I don't know if we'll ever get to IWA Mid-South on this show. I kind of hope we do, but it is something fantastic, to potentially talk about another time. But both of these guys would meet in the first round of that tournament as a match that was basically billed as, a special exhibition between the two, trainers at the CHIKARA Wrestle Factory. And on that night, Mike Quackenbush would be successful. Chris Hero felt embarrassed that Quack came into what was essentially his home promotion at the time in IWA Mid-South and beat him in front of all of the CHIKARA students, basically asserting his dominance. So Chris Hero, having that tournament that he felt was his to win, pulled out from underneath him, he would concoct a plan to do the same thing. And the Super Friends would team in the 2005 CHIKARA Tag World Grand Prix tournament. Chris Hero would carry Mike Quackenbush all the way to the finals of that tournament, only to pull the rug out from underneath him and give him the ultimate embarrassment of turning on him and losing in that tournament to the team of AC/DC, Eric Cannon and Claudio Castagnoli. Hero, along with Cannon and Claudio, would form the Kings of Wrestling stable, and over time they would gradually add more members, namely Fist, Gran Akuma, and Icarus. So this, led to Quack and Hero clashing, with a multitude of different partners, throughout the forthcoming 2 years. They would have a singles match in 2005 on Aniversario weekend at Aniversario White in Pittston, Pennsylvania, in a match that just for whatever reason wasn't very good. It really didn't click on that night. Hero would win and would deny Quackenbush the singles rematch, I should say, that he so desperately wanted. Finally, 2 years later, Hero would finally grant Quack the rematch that he wanted. He cuts a promo before this match basically explaining, as to say, I realized that, Quack would never leave me alone until I gave him this match. So I'm putting this issue to bed. I'm going to embarrass him one more time. It was a little kind of random and thrown together, but which, given the amount of hype that this match had, for 2 years of withholding it, to just kind of be like, oh, now it's happening. It did seem a little off, but ultimately it was all okay. We got the match. That was the main thing. There was an individual by the name of Michael Ryan. He went by Lacor. He was a Montreal, indie aficionado, worked with IWA Mid-South. If you are an old-time wrestling fan, you know Lacor. He, is responsible for exposing so many people to, the Quebec indie scene, specifically Kevin Steen, Kevin Owens, and El Generico or Sami Zayn. He reached out to me on AOL Instant Messenger when I was in my teens to, tell me about this promotion that was going on in Montreal and expose me to it. And for that, I will always be indebted to him and eternally grateful. Unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, but he did write a series of articles titled When We Were Marks. And I will never forget the one that he did before this match, comparing Chris Hero to Superman and Mike Quackenbush to Batman. I don't know if it is still circulating on the internet, but if it is and you plan on watching this match and you can find that article, please read it. It is tremendous and really gives you, a great impression as to what, was going on with this match. Far better than I would be able to explain it in this video. So the thing that, really didn't work for me with this match at the time in 2007 is it didn't really feel like a grudge match. Because, there wasn't an extended brawl and it, starts off with wrestling and, it didn't work for me at the time. Like I imagine all of these, Chris Hero heated grudge matches with guys like Eddie Kingston and Trick Davis, and all of his rivals throughout the years. And that's sort of what I expected here, I think, and I didn't get it. But watching it now, I realize that this is through and through a Mike Quackenbush match. And, that's really what it kind of should have been. Like, yes, there's this grudge here, but this match isn't about Mike Quackenbush hurting Chris Hero. It's not, what we would expect from a normal grudge match. This match is all about Mike Quackenbush defeating Chris Hero and finally getting that monkey off of his back. And that's, ultimately what he's able to do. And it makes sense because he almost wins this match immediately off the start with a seatbelt pin. And that's something that I picked up on more watching it now, 15 years later, than at the time where I'm like, well, this is stupid. Why aren't they punching each other? Why is he trying to wrestle? It's like when guys start a grudge match with a collar and elbow tie-up, right? But again, it really connected with me more now of like, of course, that's what Mike Quackenbush would try to do. He just wants to win the match. Chris Hero, he does such a great job in this match. He tries to, turn it into a strike fest, but Quack, is constantly, out-quicking him and hitting all of these funky arm drags and tying him up in knots. And Hero eventually gets this big, almost like he's going to go for an atomic drop, but just tosses Quack onto his bad back. We've already talked about Quack's bad back in this series, and that's a focal point in a lot of his matches. So Hero, of course, goes to work on that. And, it just wears him down and stretches him and dominates him and, throws in strikes, but really tries to use the size advantage to ground Quack and build up, a lot of heat to Quack, until Quack eventually makes a big fiery comeback. One thing that is excellent about this match, though, is the commentary on it. Shout out to Joe Sposto, Leonard F. Chikarison, for being the primary person on commentary for this match and just doing such an excellent job painting the story. So even though my memory of the build-up here was really good, it really brought in a lot of these external parts we wouldn't have seen on, the CHIKARA shows, like all of that kind of background, almost behind the scenes stuff. So a lot of talk about the Wrestle Factory and how, because these guys hate each other so much, they were training at the Wrestle Factory on opposite nights. Hero training the Rudos, Quack training the Technicos. And there's a lot of talk about Quack, having this secret weapon that he said he's coming into this match with that'll help him defeat Chris Hero, which at the time we had no idea what it was, but it would end up being such an important part of Chikara history when all was said and done. This match does get a little stiff throughout. Hero always throws these just like brutal headbutts, and he does a bunch here. He hits a bunch of like junkyard dog style ones, from the mat. It's all really brutal. He's a great prick in this match, just totally disrespectful. Head kicks to Quack. Quack, he tries to mount these fiery comebacks at points with like the windmill chops and, all of his offense, but ultimately, he doesn't have the size or the power, and Hero's just able to beat him down. But Hero's ego gets the best of him a little bit in this match. And again, that ties into this whole story, and it ties into Hero accepting the match basically on a whim almost, of knowing, well, I can beat Quack and I can shut him up and can move on from him. So Hero starts to pick up this speed a little bit, basically showing Quackenbush like, oh, I can beat your ass, but I can beat you at your own game too. And that ultimately starts to be a bit of his downfall as he runs into a huge palm strike for Quack. That gives a double down. And then that leads to, this match having a reset and really starting to come into its climax that it would eventually hit. They do a good job in this match too, showing that both of these guys, being students of the game, as I mentioned, being former partners, being former co-trainers, being really familiar with each other. They do have each other scouted really well. And that's shown, when Hero eventually, later in the match starts to go for his cravat-based, offense that he's so known for. And Quack is able to easily just spin right out of a cravat, showing like that stuff, what you've used before, what you've beat me with before, you've beat me with the Hangman's Clutch. None of that is going to work right now. You're going to have to go deep into your arsenal and do something that I've never seen before to beat me. And ultimately, Hero didn't have that, but Quack did, going back to that secret weapon. But we see a lot of like new kind of variations on both of their offense in this move. Sorry, I just have to adjust my camera there. We see a lot of different variations on their offense here. Quackenbush, rather than going for the traditional Quack and driver, he busts out the QD3. And Hero, rather, he goes for Hero's Welcome and gets it countered. So he goes to the Hero's Welcome Championship Edition that he would do from like a shoulder mount position. So we do get, these little variations. Hero at one point does like the crash landing, like the, release orange crush, but he doesn't invert it so that Quack, ends up falling face and stomach first as opposed to on his back. So even though, the back would make more sense because he had been working the back, he knows that Quack could potentially counter that into a Rana or an arm drag or something along those lines. So I really appreciated the mixing up of the offense late in the match. We get, a big headbutt duel at the end with Quack hitting, a stiff headbutt of his own, a little unexpected from him. And it leads to this, really quick sequence, and Mike Quackenbush hits like, a pop-up kind of Meteora, sky is falling, double knees, whatever you want to call it. And then he locks on his secret weapon. It's the debut of the Chikara special. That is what this match, I think, will always be remembered for. It's a hold that when he first used it, it was kind of like, that was the finish? Like, what was that thing? You like slightly twisted his wrist and ankle, and Hero, tapped and made it seem like it was the most painful, devastating maneuver of all time. So at the time, again, it was really weird and was part of, this match not connecting as well as it should have. But it works so great, in hindsight now. The Chikara special, we've, again, already talked about it on this series, but it really was, this important part of what would become, the overarching theme of Chikara. It was directly related to, the main storyline that would, carry this company for years. It was Quack's secret weapon. He used it. Hero had never seen this hold before, despite being such a student of the game, and he had no counter for it, and it caused him to tap out. And this would lead, to the Chikara special essentially being Hero's kryptonite, to go back to the Superman theme. And, Hero used to use Kryptonite by 3 Doors Down as his theme song, so it all kind of works in there. And basically, you know, Quack cuts this great promo backstage after the match saying, like, this is the CHIKARA special. I'm in the process of teaching this move to every technico that I teach on my nights at the Wrestle Factory, and they will all beat you with it, and they would, you know, over the course of the next several months. And then what I'm going to go do is I'm going to wait till you miss a practice, and I'm going to go and start teaching it to the Rudos, so when you eventually turn your back on them, just like you turned your back on me, because I know you will, because you're a scumbag, Chris Hero, they will be able to beat you with it too. Great storyline to ride out the rest of 2007. You know, unfortunately, Chris Hero would wrap up his CHIKARA run at the end of 07, which was a damn shame, because that dude was so good in CHIKARA, and he was such a highlight of those early shows. And I truly feel that CHIKARA would have never gotten to the prominent place it ended up getting without the Kings of Wrestling storyline with Chris Hero involved. This is a match that, you know, has that historical impact with it being the debut of the CHIKARA special. It was one of the biggest matches in the company history at that point, with all of the hype surrounding it. And it's a match that, even though in 2007 it didn't quite work, watching it in 2022, it is an excellent, excellent contest. 100% worth your time checking out on independentwrestling.tv. Of course, you can subscribe to my channel here on YouTube so that you never miss a video. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling50. And please join me again next time as we continue to count down Pro Wrestling's Top 50.